it is an attraction for people who get into that kind of business. When you're insulated from the world, when you're, you have access to the internet and computers, and people are, on various kinds of websites, it's very easy for people to be targeted with subversive activity. But I have to tell you, George, how comfortable are people that this is kind of like a Eric Snowden event involving, instead of the the National Security Agency, the NSA, this is involving the DOD. And the DOD, we're looking at a lot of people who are recruited into the voluntary military now, who have an IG report that's basically said the government is watching you. And it all started, most of this started fairly recently. We're talking about 2021. That's when January 6th took place. So I think that the idea that there's white subversion going on is really an outrage, by individual researchers, people who are checking this out at the DOD. Because I think, when you look at the meaning behind, the January 6th event, it's not what a lot of it's been advertised in the liberal media, that this was somehow an attempt to block a government official activity of certifying an electoral college election. That's not what really this was about. This was a backlash to the months of terror that the United States was put through by our friends on the left and certain groups connected with those on the left that are far more tolerated than anything that goes on the right. So I would say that this is not a good sign that the DOD is investigating, its own personnel and accusing them of white supremacy and white nationalism. I think it's a very bad sign.
Interesting take, John. John Curtis, OnlineColumnist.com. Democratic Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer signed an executive directive forcing the state's government's entire fleet of vehicles, both light duty and heavy duty, to make the transition to zero emission. Under Whitmer's actions, Michigan state agencies must convert all state-owned light-duty vehicles to zero-emission vehicles by 2033 and all medium and heavy-duty vehicles by 2040. They're going all electric. In October, the now hiring signs weren't as plentiful as they have been in recent years, and more workers chose to stay put. There were an estimated 8.7 million available jobs in the month, according to data released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's the lowest number of job openings since January of 2021. Catherine Austin Fitz is with us. Catherine, what do you think about all this? What's your take?
The economy is slowing, George, and one of the major reasons is the Fed has dramatically increased interest rates in an acceleration that's one of the fastest that we can remember. And that's after dramatic injection of monetary money into the economy that that goes into certain parts and not others. So you saw with the pandemic a real attack on small business, which generates a lot of the jobs. So we certainly had a pump and dump of the monetary cycle, and now we're in this. And when you take interest rates up, things slow, including the housing market. So it's not surprising we see less jobs, but they're flashing signs of possible recession ahead.
J.P. Morgan Chase is predicting the stock market's going to start going down in about 6 months to a year. What do you think about that?
When you get 6 months out, that's prophecy. We're coming into a presidential election.
That's right.
And, in presidential cycles, they tend to pump the market up. So 6 months is, I'm not a prophet, so I think it's impossible to say, but if you keep managing the economy the way the central bankers are managing the economy, they're going to shut it down.
Let me spell out Catherine's website for you, solari.com. She's got great information there. In a moment, Douglas Preston joins us, back with us after 6 years. His latest work is called The Lost Tomb, and other real-life stories of bones, burials, and murder. He's next on Coast to Coast AM.
Approaching a railroad crossing.
And I know you're going to want some after hearing this. This is an amazing story.
We've got Stephen and Malachi Gregory in Nelson, New Zealand.
I understand that Malachi, who is 8, almost 9 years old now, was suffering with not just 1 or 2 warts, but I mean a significant outbreak of warts all over his body. So significant it impacted his ability to really function.
Yeah, he was having trouble even holding a pencil to write. That was Ty's book, actually, that got me thinking about it.
I'm not surprised. It is an amazing immunomodulator, and so I can see that it would work.
And so at what point did you see that there was actually improvement? It's really going to work?
Well, look, we really started to notice it around 12 weeks. You can see these things actually getting smaller and smaller, and then going down to where they're just little red marks. The whole things are gone. And we're talking about one the size of a corner. I thought, no way, that's going to...
Wow.
It's just been miraculous. To see him get into a pair of shoes.
Yes. How wonderful.
It's great to see him so happy and confident.
Absolutely wonderful.
Our friends that have seen him, they're just blown away.
This is awesome.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Another amazing story. Why? We're talking about Carnivora. Call them to awaken your immune system and protect yourself now. Call 1-866-836-8735. That's 1-866-836-8735. Or visit carnivora.com. CARNIVORA. Carnivora.com.
Untuckit has everything he needs this holiday season. Shop now and save big with our biggest sale of the year happening at Untuckit.com or at any of the 80-plus Untuckit stores. Untuckit shirts are designed to be worn on top. They keep him looking sharp and feeling comfortable. He'll love to unwrap one of our iconic button-downs, super soft flannels, or cozy sweaters. Get them while they last during our biggest sale of the year. Shop Untuckit's biggest sale of the year happening now at Untuckit.com or at any of our over 80 stores.
And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Douglas Preston with us has published at least 36 books of both nonfiction and fiction, of which 29 have been New York Times bestsellers. He's a co-author with Lincoln Child of the Pendergast series of thrillers, worked as an editor at the American Museum of Natural History in New York, taught nonfiction writing at Princeton University, writes about archaeology and anthropology for the New Yorker magazine, and serves as the president of the Authors Guild, the nation's oldest and largest association of authors and journalists. His latest book is called The Lost Tomb, Other Real-Life Stories of Bones, Burials, and Murder. Douglas, welcome back to the program.
Well, thank you, George. Good to be back.
How have you been?
Oh, it's been great. It's been great. I've been touring and selling my book and telling everyone about it.
That's a great title, by the way. Tell me about this thing.
Well, it talks about one of the stories in the book. These are all true stories, by the way. One of them is about the discovery of the big tomb in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt, right next to King Tut's tomb. And it wasn't found until 1995, and it turned out to be the largest tomb in the Valley of the Kings. And it was built by the great pharaoh Ramses II, or sometimes called Ramses the Great, who lived to be 91 years old, and he built this tomb for 50 of his sons, who predeceased him.
Jeez.
So I went to Egypt and I was part of the exploration of this tomb, and it's huge. There are over 120 burial chambers in the tomb.
Why does it take so long, Douglas, to uncover these tombs? You know, like you said, they found it in the 1900s, 1990s. I mean, these things were built thousands of years ago.
It was, yeah, the tomb was built over 3,000 years ago, but what happened was, when they excavated King Tut's tomb, which is right next door, they dumped all the debris and everything they took out of the shaft leading into that tomb on top of this tomb. And so people thought it was just a pile of rocks.
They buried it even more than that way it was buried.
Exactly, yeah. They didn't know that far down there was this doorway into this tomb. And it was discovered by this American archaeologist named Kent Weeks, who was a professor at the American University in Cairo. and he was doing a little test trench, and he saw this lintel with a door, and he had a flashlight with him, so he scraped away the rock, and he crawled in, and he found himself in a little room. It didn't look very important. Then he noticed at the far side of the room was another lintel, so he cleared that out, and he wriggled in, turned on the flashlight, and he was in a corridor that was over 100 feet long, going into the heart of the mountain. And at the end of the corridor was this gigantic stone statue of Osiris, the god of the underworld. And he just about died. It was, the greatest discovery in the Valley of the Kings since King Tut's tomb.
What kind of technology do you think, Douglas, they possessed in order to build these things?
They had a whole lot of people, and they worked it really hard. These tombs are built into limestone mountains, basically, and they just chiseled it out, chip by chip by chip, and they had thousands of people doing it, and that's pretty much how they did it.
It's pretty remarkable. It is. And are they, when you look at it from the inside, are they huge?
They're gigantic. I mean, the tomb is still being excavated. It's over 120 rooms. And when I was there, there were a whole bunch of burial chambers that hadn't been opened up yet. They were, the tomb had been robbed in antiquity, so there was nothing in it except no gold or anything like that. But at a certain point, I asked the archaeologist, I said, I've had a dream ever since I was a little kid of being the first one in an Egyptian burial chamber. You think that'd be possible? And he said, well, all right. So he had his workmen clear a little hole into one of the rooms that hadn't been entered, and they picked me up. They shoved me in head first through this hole at the top of the door. I fell down into the room, and then they put a light bulb in on a cage after me. And then the archaeologist said, what do you see? And I said, oh my God, everywhere, the gleam of gold. And then there was a silence, and he said, get out of here, that's a bunch of bull, you don't see anything. And
I love it.
I didn't.
I love it. And good thing you weren't claustrophobic, too. My gosh.
Well, I am claustrophobic, and I'm telling you, that was, but when you're a journalist, you got to be uncomfortable once in a while.
It happens. That's fantastic. Have you met Zahi Hawass at all, Douglas?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I spent some time with him when I was in Egypt. He was head of the antiquities. So he's been doing that for a long time.
Yeah.
He's quite an interesting guy.
He's a character. He was there during the Mubarak reign, and I guess as he's gone on tour across the United States lately, talking about the pyramids and things like that.
Yeah, there's still a lot to be discovered. When I was in this tomb, Kent Weeks, his archaeologist, took me to the very back of the tomb, hundreds of feet in the mountain. And there's this room. It had a beautifully plastered floor. And he said, stamp on the floor with your foot. And I did. And there was this incredible hollow boom that sounded. And he looked at me and he said, there's another chamber down there, a big one, and it's completely sealed. It's never been robbed. Look at this beautiful floor. It's hidden under the floor. Now, the Egyptians have not yet opened that up, but when they do, it's going to be incredible what they find.
That's fantastic. I want to talk to you about the title of your book, The Lost Tomb. The part that says, of course, real-life stories of bones, burials, that's obvious. But what about murder? What does that mean?
Well, one of the stories in this tomb is about the serial killer known as the Monster of Florence. And he was one of the most, he makes Jack the Ripper look like, Mr. Rogers. He was one of the most horrific serial killers in all the annals of world crime. And what he did, he killed young lovers in the hills around Florence, Italy. The Italians Italian young people live at home until they get married, and they don't get married till they're about 30. So, sex in cars is a national pastime. Someone once told me that 60% of Florentines were conceived in the back of a car. So, on the weekend at night, there are all these cars parked in these beautiful hills full of young people making love. And this killer targeted them.
Oh my gosh.
And he would kill the man first, then he would kill the woman, and then he would perform a very bizarre, I really...
You don't have to get into that.
I won't get into it, a ritual with him, and he, over a period of 11 years, he killed 14 people.
Jeez, what was his method of killing them? Guns?
He had a .22 pistol, Beretta .22, which had a defective firing pin, so that it left a very distinctive mark on the shell. And then he would leave the ejected shells at the site as his calling card, so that the police would know that it was him. And he had used the same gun in the same box of 50 bullets for 11 years.
How did they catch him, Douglas?
They didn't catch him.
They never did?
They did not. I lived in Italy for a number of years, and I teamed up with the Italian journalist who had covered this case. He was the local crime reporter for the La Nazione, the local newspaper. And we wrote this book called The Monster of Florence. But at a certain point when I was living in Italy, he said to me, I think I know who this guy is. I am almost certain that I've identified him.
Was he still alive at that time?
Yes. And I said, Mario, we're journalists. We need to go talk to him. And he said, are you kidding me? I'm not going talking to a serial killer. I live in his territory and I have a daughter. And I said, Mario, we've got to do this. So he said, well, I'm only going to go under a fake name. So we went to this guy's house at 10:15 at night, or his apartment actually. We didn't warn him ahead of time. We didn't want to give him any kind of warning. He just showed up. He showed up late enough that we're pretty sure he was at home. And he was. And Mario gave a fake name. And we went in there.
Under what auspices did you show up at his door?
Well, he'd been connected to the Monster of Florence case. So Mario told him that I was an American journalist working for the New Yorker magazine, and that I was interviewing everyone connected with the case. It was just routine. We just wanted to have a few words with him. And so he brought us up. But as soon as we walked into the apartment, he looked at Mario Spezzi, who used a fake name. And he said, wait. You're Mario Spezzi.
Oh, no.
Just heard your name, because you're Mario Spezzi. You're the guy who wrote all those articles about the monster of Florence.
Oh, my God.
I've read everything you've written.
Oh. Now, is this guy still alive or is he dead by now?
He is still alive. And, we interviewed him and we asked him at the end, are you the monster of Florence?
And of course, he denied it.
Well, he said something that's not repeatable on the radio. Not quite denying it, but not quite admitting it either.
Are the murders still continuing?
No, they stopped. And the Italian police were so confounded by these murders that they secretly asked the American FBI, the famous behavioral science unit that was made so famous by the Silence of the Lambs, asked them to prepare a portrait, a psychological portrait of this monster of Florence. And they did that. And one of the things the psychological portrait said